nice to see so many new faces. I'm honored to introduce my friend Henry Chan, who I met a year ago. And surprisingly, I contacted him asking him to join our Rotary, and then he said, actually, I would like to speak at your club, then I will make a decision. So hopefully you won't be disappointed today, Henry. Henry is a Canadian political commentator, grassroots advocate, and emerging young leader, bringing policy expertise, frontline activism, and generational leadership. At just 23 years old, you heard me right, 23 years old, he has run for at least both municipal and provincial levels, knocking on 16,000 plus doors, placing second out of 8 candidates in his municipal campaign. He has worked on Parliament Hill as a parliamentary assistant to an MP and a former shadow minister of international development. He has been invited to testify before Parliament on foreign interference, Canada-China relations, and human rights. As a co-director of Saskatchewan Stands with Hong Kong, Henry has led over 100 lobbying meetings in Ottawa, contributing to the Hong Kong Lifeboat Scheme and Bill C-70 on foreign interference. For his impact in public policy and volunteerism, Henry received the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal. His insights have been featured in national publications, and he is a respected voice on Canada-China relations and Indo-Pacific region. Today, Henry will be speaking to us on the Canola and EV tariff situation, exploring how Canada plays politics and how Canada can safeguard its agriculture industry without losing the moral argument. Fellow Rotarians and guests, let's put our hands together for Henry as he presents. Thank you so much.
I was just calling that we hug instead of shaking hands. There we are. We get both.
Yes.
There we are. So I do want to thank Maureen for that brilliant introduction. And thank you for letting me speak here today. And Mr. President of the Rotary Club, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that covers most of everybody here tonight. We are in the midst of the geopolitics of China and the United States. And those of you that follows me will have read my brilliant article in the Hill Times on canola and EVs, and my much more brilliant article in the Western Standard on canola and EVs, and my even more brilliant article in the Hub on canola and EVs. Woo! Now I do admit that I do come up here feeling tremendously nervous, addressing a Saskatchewan crowd on canola. And let's face it, Saskatchewanians knows canola better than some people knows their family members. So I do want to apologize ahead of time, because in the gaze of Saskatchewan farmers that are amongst us tonight, what I say may be a little bit controversial. But of course, what is controversial to one may be music to the ears of another people. So, and I do admit that in my political career, there has been nothing but controversy. But nonetheless, I do want to share and shape the discussion this afternoon on what I know best and what Parliament asked me to advise them and testify before them on. which is how China plays politics with their political playbook. And Maureen said we're going to have Q&A after, and you can ask me on anything, whether it is China, about anything about my time on Parliament Hill. I'm open to that. But to just put into context what we're dealing with here today. So in October of 2024, China followed the US and imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese manufactured electric vehicles. And they cite unfair competition in the North American EV industry because Chinese electric vehicles are indeed state subsidized. And then in March of 2025, China imposed a 100% retaliatory tariff on our canola, mainly in terms of oil and meal, and a 25% duty on pork, aquatics, and seafood products in retaliation. And then in August of 2025, they applied a further 75.8% tariff as an anti-dumping measure on our canola seed. But why is China doing this now? They have once again turned Canadian canola into a political weapon. The preliminary tariffs on canola are nothing less than economic blackmail. It is designed to force Canada into submission. And this has come at a critical moment when we're effectively pushed into a two-front trade war with both China and the United States. And Beijing's choice of commodity was no accident. It targets the livelihood of prairie farmers, knowing full well that the political base in Ottawa differs sharply from Premier Scott Moe's Sask Party and Premier Daniel Smith's UCP. By using canola and EV as bargaining chips, China creates the perfect condition for driving a wedge between Ottawa and Western provinces. They tap into long-standing grievances over carbon tax, natural resources management, and transfer payments. It is a classic divide and conquer tactic, pitting sectors against sectors, provinces against provinces, and we can already see in recent news that the fault lines are cracking, with Premier of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta on one end of the spectrum calling for the EV tariffs to be removed, and then Premier Doug Ford on the other calling for it to be sustained. And this, combined with the lack of leadership with the federal government on this issue, is what China wants to see. And it's classic that we're once again, we fall into their trap of a divide and conquer tactic. Now these are indeed calculated. The Chinese Communist Party, they have moved to design this to divide the country, isolate provinces, and undermine our national resolve. But why, I'm just going to share a little bit on why I am arguing that calling on the Fed to remove EV tariffs is indeed deeply flawed. Whether or not the original EV tariffs were politically motivated, as some may argue, Canada cannot yield to Beijing's demand. Protecting North American auto industry was only part of the rationale. The bigger and deeper concern in this argument is national security. Chinese EVs, which has been described by many as spy machine on wheels, due to their potential ability to capture audio, video, location, and biometric data, and transmitting it back to Beijing, are indeed worrying. And under Chinese intelligence law, any Chinese company which produces these EVs are required to assist in intelligence service. So if they do want any of those data that are collected with their EVs, they're allowed to do that. And these are not paranoid fears, because they are also very deep and well-written congressional reports which points to the same thing. And that was the case when the US applied the tariffs in the first place. Part of it was protecting the auto industry, and the other part is protecting national security. Now, I want to come to you at this point with a moral case. As a Westerner, as somebody who ran in our provincial and municipal politics, I do share the resentment that we have towards Ottawa. And often some of these policies that Ottawa sets favors the East, which is their political base, against the West. But on this issue, national security itself must rise above regional frustrations. China will never be our friend, and this was well demonstrated when President Xi Jinping stood shoulder to shoulder with Putin, the Russian president, and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. And on this front, the Liberals and the Conservative recognizes what is at stake. And both of them have said that these are not easy things to deal with, and with the Conservatives saying that it is a national security concern, and we cannot undermine our security. So what do we then must do to stand up to China with dignity and courage? The easy political move in this situation is to plead for the canola market back. But that's exactly what China wants. It is to condition Canada into silencing on Hong Kong, on the Uyghur concentration camps, on Taiwan, or on foreign interference. And they put the fear of losing Perry exports in terms of canola or agricultural products, etc., to do this. And this pattern must stop, because it's not the first time we've been in this place. If you remember, canola was indeed weaponized during the Meng Wanzhou and the Two Michaels crisis. And if we do cave now, we send a strong signal that every time when Ottawa makes a sovereign decision that Beijing dislikes, that Canadian farmers in Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba will pay for the cost. But here is the alternative I want to provide to you tonight. We hold out. We try to crush more canola seed at home because we only crush about 55% of it. And we direct canola meal into Japan, Europe, and Southeast Asia, in which the supplies, the demand rather, is growing. And we invest in long-term infrastructure that makes us less dependent on one market and more resilient against coercion like this one. Yet losing billion, of course, I will be honest with you, will hurt. But nonetheless, it is a once-in-a-generation time that we can inoculate our farmers from Beijing's weaponization of trade. And provincial leaders should not show the cracks in international resolve. They should refrain from calling on Ottawa to do one thing or the other. Quiet diplomacy with allies, and investment in prairie industries will make us indispensable without inviting countermeasures. We don't need to announce anything. We just need to do it. But at the end of the day, we are the single largest producers of the highest quality canola in the world. This is a leadership moment for political leaders. And in The Art of War, Shunzi did say that one of the things that you need, it is the first chapter, if you read The Art of War, the moral compass. If you can get your moral compass straight, then people will follow the lead of their leader without fear of danger or death. It is indeed a Churchillian moment for political leaders, and great leaders knows how to turn the tide around into opportunities. Federal ministers or provincial ministers should be going to the farms, and they should hold town halls and put the question directly to the farmers. Do you want to bow to Beijing's pressure, or do we stand up And in the meantime, you give us some time to try to diversify and protect our sovereignty. And I'll give you Australia as a clear example. When China banned their lobster export, the Australian government didn't say, oh, we're so scared, we're just going to go and please China. What they indeed did was the farmers on TV, on television, said, if we stand on principle, and if we have to lose a season of crop, we're willing to do it. And we will follow the lead of the government. Taiwan, I think Taiwan is somewhat of a smaller country, small island country. They're about 20 odd million, smaller than us by quite a bit. When they put tariffs, and indeed they in fact banned their pineapple export, they stood up to China and say, we're going to use it ourselves. We're going to sell it to other countries around us. We're not going to cave into your demand. If Taiwan, a small country of 23 million, can do the same, we can do the same as well. We're a much bigger country and we have much more natural resources than they do. And of course, telling farmers the truth that the short-term pain is real, but the long-term independence in this case is worth more. And it aligns people with their leadership with a shared choice. And that is the kind of resilience that China cannot fracture. And if we're just willing to say, oh, we're so scared, we're so small, we risk sending the wrong message because we're small, that we're at their mercy. And we must say to them that we're not scared. You need our products too. And we're defending our sovereignty. And we're prepared to take the consequences. And China, we say to them, so will you. Because bullies like China respect strength and not weaknesses. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what I want to share with you here today. So, I don't know if Marie wants to, or do I pick the questions, or you want to? Okay, sure.
Thank you for the talk and the principle. Thanks for coming to Canada and participating in our democratic process. I wish you well on your employment prospects, post your time in Ottawa. It strikes me that part of this issue is that we've got one product that's got a clear international comparative advantage. That's canola. On the other side, it's been framed by Canadian politicians as electric vehicles, where there is no inherent comparative advantage for Canadian prospects in that area. Do you have any comments about Canada and electric vehicles, notwithstanding what China's trying to do?
Well, what China has done now in the national media, and indeed in what we're doing right now, is they've shaped the narrative, and we've given them the narrative to say that this is a trade war between canola and EVs. We don't want that. What we want to do at the forefront is to say to them that your electric vehicles, we don't want roving on our street because it is indeed a national security concern. Do you want China, and this is the question that perhaps one can ask themselves, is do you want China to be able to collect data, biometrics, and stuff like that, and reporting it back to Beijing? Because we have to separate the chatter here. China wants us to lump everything into a trade war, and exactly what I said before, they want to divide and conquer. They want to pit one sector against another, they want to pit one province against the other. So that's what I'm going to want to say about that. But the other more important point is we do have some leverage because China needs our products too. We do 20 million tons of canola a year. Saskatchewan does 55% of it, which is about 13 million tons. They're already going to India. They're going to Australia for canola. And Australia, I believe they do about 5 million tons. And India does about 11 million tons, most for domestic consumption because they have a large population as well. We are the single largest producer of canola. And you also have to remember that China buys the cheapest products. They buy the canola seeds. I guess we can say the value-added products of oil and meals are mostly exported to the United States and the EU because they don't buy much of the seeds. So, and we only, right now, I think we only crush about 55%. There's a lot of room to grow. And Southeast Asia is a huge buyer of canola oil for cooking. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, Derek.
Hey, Henry, by the way, thanks for the talk. That was real good. And you mentioned Sun Tzu, and of course, if you've read that, you know that he said, if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you can be assured of victory. You know, our relationship with the United States can be, I think, analogized as an elephant in bed with a mouse. And so if he chooses to roll over, we just make sure we get out of the way. Do you think that China sees the opportunity of a fractured relationship with the United States as an opportunity to weaken Canada and gain access to their soft underbelly, as they've called it?
Right, so the one narrative is right now, and I think you've heard this before, is because we're having issues with the US, and therefore we must expand our access to China. And I don't think that is right. That is deeply flawed on multiple fronts. And even if I put it to you on a moral principle, it is deeply wrong. Because, and I found myself writing in one of my articles, I said, if our elbow is up towards the Trump administration, shouldn't our elbows be way higher up against an authoritarian regime? Mm-hmm. And you did say that in the Art of War, he did mention that we need to know ourselves and our enemies in order to win. I don't think we quite know ourselves, no. And I don't think we know our enemies either. I am sure that when our provincial government went to China to negotiate, they had no Chinese experts with them. Because if you know how China plays politics, you will know that they don't give a dime about a provincial leader. They will usually meet with people who are on the same level. And first of all, our premier doesn't have the authority to negotiate on foreign affairs and international. He has a little bit of authority negotiating for the provincial government, but it is not on an equal basis. He should have went and rallied other provincial premiers, which are also under attack, which is Manitoba and Alberta, and went to the federal government. So we go together and say to them, without desperation, desperation is what they're looking for, and without desperation, say to them that, well, if you want our products, we have to negotiate on equal terms. It's not because we're small that we must submit to what you want. And we are going to stand on principles in terms of human rights, democracy, the rule of law. These are universal values, and these transcend national borders. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Anybody else?
Isn't that what the Canadian government is doing, though? Looking for new markets? Isn't
Well,
that why he's going to Europe? Why he's going to Southeast Asia? Is he, and why he hasn't said much about?
Well, I indeed hope they're doing what I'm wanting them to do, and I don't need any assurance from them because, like I said, quiet diplomacy sometimes works better than public desperation. But What I will argue that we have not made the moral case. If we are going to make the moral case, we have to have the farmers with us. Because right now, when Ottawa does that, they're going to upset the farmers. And when the farmers tells them to remove EVs, the federal government doesn't even respond, right? Like, I don't think, and I might be wrong, but I haven't heard much of what the federal government have said on the removal of tariffs, right? And the fundamental thing, like I said, is national security for us. And of course, there are other political agendas in terms of wanting to switch out to electric vehicles and so on and so forth. That is not a question in this case. The question is, China is an antagonistic regime that are doing things, not just outside of the border in terms of Hong Kong, Taiwan, with the concentration camp with the Uyghurs, but also you have to remember foreign interference. I gave a talk at the CIC, I was standing there for an hour and a half, and I talked about foreign interference. These are nasty things, and they're doing these within Canadian borders, and our federal government has been nothing but reluctant to act. And sometimes towards a regime, like I said, you cannot respond with weakness. You have to say to them, we have a spine. What we have done in the last 10 years has been pretty spineless, and I think a lot of people would agree with me in terms of that towards China. So I hope that answers what your concern is.
Canadians are kind of wishy-washy because we try to appeal to everybody, and that never works, of course, but I think that's the problem. We look at the world possibly differently that way, and we tend to want to please everybody, and you can't please everybody.
Yes, I do agree. And but on issues like this, we have to set the moral case and stand by it.
Yeah.
Whether come what may, we say to them, we're prepared to take the consequences. And we're talking about not a whole lot of money, we're talking about $4.9 billion, in terms of Saskatchewan, it's $4.9 billion. We spent more fixing the federal government's corrupted Phoenix pay system. I think it was about, because I kind of dealt with this when I was on Parliament, I think it went to about $5.2 billion.
Is it fixed yet? I'm not sure.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not. So that is what we're talking about, and I give you that as a comparison. There are a lot of money, more than $4.9 billion wasted on elsewhere. But this is a moral fight. And we say to China, we're not going to submit. Because if we allow them to do it, like I said, they're going to use it again and again. They used it in the Meng Wanzhou case. They're going to use it this time, and they're going to use it again if they're successful.
So Henry, then when you talked about what it is that we could do, we could diversify to the market as far as who we sell our canola to and process more of our product here. I think those are both good ideas. What stops us from doing something like maybe canceling visas for students from China or things like that, and maybe deporting some of their own people back to their country? Is that something that might create urgency with China or create at least a thorn in their side?
I was just, Mike, right? That's your name. I was just saying to him, we should, you're very right. We should be asking for reciprocity. We give them a lot of access. We allow their international students to come here. We allow their research to come here. In fact, we even allow their spies to roam through our streets. Right, I've seen it. And in terms of election, everybody have known, and it's been reported and studied in the Foreign Interference Commission, that they have meddled in our election. We've given them a lot of access. And what we should be doing is demand reciprocity. If you're not going to give us the same access, we're going to get rid of some of these access too. That is not weakness, that is being strong and asking. And reciprocity is a very, very civilized thing in world politics. It is what country asks for. When you want something from me, you should give me the same as well.
You know, just to underline that, When I go to Colombia, in the airport, I have to pay a $150 reciprocity levy for something that Canada has done to the nation of Colombia. And I should call it the reciprocity levy, and you can't come in unless you pay it.
Exactly. It's a very civilized thing.
Henry, you referenced a time frame of 10 years that Canada's been spineless in their international relations. With your experience in Ottawa, do you think change in federal government is due and will improve our position globally?
I have to answer that, saying that I might answer with some conflict of interest because the NP I did work for was a conservative, and I happened to be on 2 conservative board as well. But the fundamental thing is a change of government won't work unless we have the right people in there. And having the right people in there also, it also commands us to also set the moral case straight. If we're just gonna say we're so hungry to sell pork, sell this, sell that, sell canola, sell lobsters, we're not gonna get there. We're gonna have to say, we're gonna make sure that we're gonna try to diversify, so we're not dependent, whether it is the US coming at us or China, and the US is a tougher issue to crack because most of our trades are indeed with the US. But we have to set the moral standard right. Canada was once respected for holding moral standards on a lot of things, and I don't think we have the same standing now. There's 2 of you, so let's go with Mike first.
I kind of a follow-up to that same question. We have this issue with China, and I think you're right, because we don't have a moral compass. Should we not be using that same moral standard, that moral compass, with other autocracies that we deal with around the world? Because China might be the most successful and the largest, but they're not the only one. And I don't know if we've taken any precautions or any, or if we look at the other ones.
Well, we should indeed be doing the same thing. And it is about, in politics, there are convictions and determination that you stand by, and what you do are built up on that. That has to be very clear. And I have not heard people use the word conviction when I was on Parliament Hill, and you rarely hear it when politicians speaks in this country. So that has to be very clear. And I agree with you, whether it is India in terms of foreign interference, or Iran, or any of these regimes, we should have the same moral compass, even the United States. Karen?
Well, maybe this is too big of a question, but it could start a
I
great
would try.
conversation. So, what do you think? Is this a make the case for the separatist movement, for the division of Canada? We hear all the time, East versus West, Ottawa versus farmers, you know, or does it actually the opposite and say now is the time to unite more than ever? Like, you're right, Henry, we don't have our own shit together. So how are we gonna, what does China want? Do we do that by allowing these separatist discussions to happen? Or do we further unite as a stronger Canada and get rid of interprovincial trade barriers and be our own best customer? Thoughts?
Well,
Pretty loaded, sorry.
I will say, as a caveat, that I stand for a united Canada, and that will also always be the case. And on the other point, you say we are indeed divided, and we're, like I said, we're showing the cracks to China. That's what China wants.
Yeah.
What they want is to see us scrambling for the markets back, and saying that they want one province against it, and that's what is happening. That shouldn't be the case. What we want is all the premiers together, including the federal government, go to China, tell them the moral case, and say to them, this is what we stand on. You don't want to trade with us, too bad.
Do you see that happening?
Like I said, I haven't heard much of convictions or determination in Canadian politics in a long time.
Thank you.